You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. Joining me today to talk about this big win, 42-19 over the Eagles, is KP of Niners Nation. Now, KP, before you say anything, when I asked you to do this live with me, you said, I wanted to be on the record that the 49ers are going to win by multiple scores. When you said that, were you expecting this type of performance and this big of a win over the Eagles?
So I did think that they were going to win pretty comfortably just because of the spot and everything I talked about. 42-19 though, like if you say that, I feel like you're lying, right? So even like 28-14 or something like that felt good, but 42-19, I don't know about all that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because the 49ers started the game really badly. Like the first quarter just looked like, I don't know. I don't want to say a repeat of the NFC Championship because it's almost unfair to say, but it just looked scary. It looked like, oh no, like, the crowd was into it. The 49ers couldn't really get anything going. They had penalties. They were losing yardage. But then after that, it was a completely different game. And I don't know what happened. Like, there weren't any plays for Christian McCaffrey in the first quarter. I know a lot of people were talking about that. And so 2 consecutive 3-and-outs. But after that, it seemed like they settled down and almost like they were passing to set up the run later in the game. Kind of, what did you think about that first quarter and how Kyle Shanahan just kind of flipped it from there?
So my main takeaway from the first quarter was actually the defense holding the Eagles to 2 field goals. Like, that was huge. Imagine being down out of the gate, 14-0. Now what? Now it's all the pressure on you to go out and score. Can you hear the dogs? Because it is really bad.
Yeah, I could hear, but they're all good. All good.
Okay. Yeah. So if they're down 14-0, what do you do, man? A lot of pressure to come back, score touchdowns on every drive, which they ended up doing. But I think that the defense deserves a lot of credit. Offensively, they didn't panic. They had a pretty clear plan, and it worked. And, 5 touchdowns in a row, 5 or 6, whatever it was, that's impressive. Like, against anybody, that's impressive. To do it against Philly on the road is even more impressive.
I feel like on both sides of the ball, they didn't panic, especially after that first quarter. I think for the offense, it would have been easy to panic. Of course, when you hold them to 2 field goals as a defense, you're not really panicking. You're thinking, oh, this is going all according to plan. But I think kind of after that, once you get past the first half, I think there's some room to feel some panic because the Eagles are a second half team and this is what they do. They go into halftime being down, and then what do? They come back from behind. So I think that was the true test, right? It wasn't the first half, it was the second half and being able to respond to that. And it got kind of scary in the second half when Dre Greenlaw has that moment in which I think it was Devontae Smith that he pushed to the ground out of bounds. He kind of did a little wrestling move on him, not going to lie. That was worthy of a penalty there. But then they got into the sideline drama because that happened right in front of the Eagles sideline. And then you have who I guess his name is Big Dom, the Eagles security guy on the sideline, getting chippy with a player, which is not something you typically see. He's not a player. He's not a ref. And he put his hands on Dre Greenlaw, and Dre Greenlaw kind of gave him a little love tap. And that kind of started a whole melee and Greenlaw getting ejected from the game, as did Big Dom, which I've never seen anything like that before. Ever. Like, what'd you think about that moment? Because that was scary because losing a guy like Dre Greenlaw for the defense is huge, of course. And still it felt like, that was early in the second half. It still felt like the Eagles could come back in the game, if they put, some drives together. So that was kind of scary to see that happen. And it gave the Eagles, who were kind of, lulling at that point of the game, a boost, right? So what did you feel about that, about Greenlaw? And just what ensued afterwards.
I mean, a Greenlaw penalty is inevitable at this point, it feels like. You can tell like Kyle Shanahan loves the way he plays. So he's going to let him get away with these kind of penalties because for whatever reason, it just like gets the defense going. So losing him was a big deal. And like, there's no way to replace that level of player, that level of, I'm going to punch you in the mouth. I'm going to slam you on the ground, even if it's after the whistle type of player. Like he sets the tone for the 49ers defense. It was weird to me. The way that the broadcast and the way that they were making out this big Dom person to be like he's some superhero. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we making it about?
They said they were talking about they're gonna build a statue for him.
You're like down multiple touchdowns. We're talking about a security guard. How weird is that? But so the Eagles ended up scoring on that drive. I think what ensued after that was even more big, right? So the 49ers offense, I think they scored in like 3 or 4 plays right after that. So that was my main takeaway because you don't want to wake up a sleeping giant. And the 49ers gave the Eagles a chance, right? They left that door open by letting them score after that penalty, kept the drive alive. But the 49ers shut the door right away. Them being able to score at will in the way that they did. Like I knew that they were going to have some success just based on the matchups, based on the numbers. But putting up a 40-burger on the road, did not see that coming.
Deebo Samuel maybe had one of his best games ever, and he did it in, dramatic fashion because, we all know what Deebo said about, Bradbury in the offseason. He backed all the talk up in this game in a big way. And one of the moments like after, the big Dom and Greenlaw thing was Deebo having that big touchdown. And that probably brought back all of the momentum, if it ever left, back to the 49ers. And then he follows that with another big touchdown later in the game. So what do you think about Deebo in this performance, right? When he came through in that all black fit, the big boots, I was like, man, he better not let us down in this one because I mean that would have been bad. But I mean it definitely seemed like Deebo had his signature Deebo type of game.
So I thought that it was really cool that Kyle Shanahan leaned into it, right, and gave him an opportunity to score in these plays. Obviously, Kyle didn't know he was going to go for 116 and 2 touchdowns, but Deebo, like having a guy who you can throw a pass, like 5-yard pass to, and he runs through a tackle of a linebacker, and then he outruns all your DBs. And we're seeing that like multiple times, having a guy that you can turn around and hand the ball to, knowing that he can hold up and, again, outrun everybody. Like that, the way that they're built, it's very tough to stop. So we're talking about Deebo, but he scored twice. And then look at everybody else. Like everybody is scoring. And I think it's because of guys like Deebo, right? He keeps you honest. And like there's really no way to guard him. Like they're using him as a running back in some instances. He's always going to get a reverse. You don't know when it's coming. And I think that's another really difficult part. But I think Shanahan deserves a lot of credit knowing how much this meant to Deebo and how he gave him opportunities to score. Like right now, Deebo's probably on his phone looking at what story to post on IG, and he's going to go at the Eagles. And I love that for him. And I love that Kyle gave him a chance to do that too.
Well, yeah, it's awesome because I'm sure these two teams are going to meet again. So that just builds,
100%.
it builds the excitement for that next one. But of course, I think we also have to talk about Brock Purdy. I was so impressed with Brock Purdy and his ability to pretty much just forget those first 2 drives. And I had a feeling it was going to happen at some point in the game. But he made some big time plays. He had a number of big 3rd down conversions, especially in the second half, that kept drives moving, that ultimately ended up in 6 straight touchdown scoring drives for the 49ers after the first quarter. So I mean, Brock Purdy's performance was really impressive in this one. It's hard to go back to the scene of, one of your season-ending injuries and be able to play like that, right? But that's kind of what Brock Purdy has shown us all season. He was 19 to 27, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns, passer rating of 148.8, no interceptions. There was a close one there by Blankenship, but no interceptions. He took 2 sacks. That happened in the first quarter. And it just seemed like the offense and Brock Purdy never looked back from that point on. I mean, he was on a tear. It's not easy to play against this Eagles defensive line. I think as we saw in that first quarter, they were giving him some fits, but he stuck in there and he made some really big plays when the team needed him most.
You can see why Kyle loves this dude, like just the way that he plays. I think he doesn't get credit for enough. He doesn't get enough credit for the little things that he does. You remember the snap that was a little errant that he caught one handed. Like that could have easily ended the drive, and instead they go down and score points. He had the run, the carry where a safety or DB, somebody had him lined up for like a gain of 1, and instead he like runs through that tackle, and now it's 2nd and 1 instead of 2nd and 9. I think those little things that Brock does and that brings to the table, like every week he does something like that where he's always keeping the offense ahead of the chains. And then, I mean, his willingness to throw the ball down the field always gives him a chance. But I think people forget that he's 23 years old. Like he's not supposed to be doing the things that he's doing. And the fact that he is, we're almost taking it for granted already. But it's pretty clear that whenever he's under center, if he finishes a game, like they're almost guaranteed to score 30, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I know a lot of the conversation this week, as it has been for a few weeks now among 49er fans. I'm sure nationally you're going to start to hear more about Brock Purdy being in the MVP conversation. And rightfully so. He definitely deserves to be in the conversation. I don't know if he'll end up getting the award, but he's definitely making a pretty strong case these last few games. As is Christian McCaffrey, he also had a good game in this one, 17 carries, 93 yards. And I want to go back to the 6 straight touchdown drives that they had. So it was 85-yard touchdown drive, 90-yard touchdown drive, 75-yard, 77-yard, 75, 47. Like that's just they were marching down the field pretty much at will at a certain point in this game. And I know that Jalen Hurts, left at one point when he scrambled and he got checked out for a concussion. He ended up coming back to the game. But when he was out, I was like, I don't want anyone to turn this into, oh, the Eagles only lost because Jalen Hurts couldn't finish the game, couldn't come back like he always does. Well, he did end up coming back, but I just wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any excuses for these Eagles fans. And I really don't think there is. I mean, when your team loses 42-19, that isn't just a one play thing. That isn't just like a couple of drives thing. That is like a full-on domination from the 49ers. And now the 49ers have played the Eagles and the Cowboys, have scored 42 points in each of those games, and they've outscored the Eagles and the Cowboys by 84-29. And that's crazy because Eagles and Cowboys are both seen as the two other juggernauts in the NFC, right? So what does that tell you about this 49ers team and this push that they're going to make for the end of the season and going into the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, since the bye, it's pretty much been the same thing, right? We're seeing the best of both worlds. We're seeing what their ceiling looks like. So you're talking about how they're dropping 40 against the best teams in the NFC. And I'm looking at how they're keeping these teams under 3 touchdowns. Like holding a defense or holding like a Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Yeah. That is a trio that is among the best, if not the best, in the NFL. And after those first 2 drives, like where were those dudes, right? There wasn't really like a long completion after the first couple of drives. Like AJ Brown and Smith, they end up having their numbers. Like if you look 8 for 114, yeah. Devonta Smith 8 or 9 for 96, but it really didn't feel that way. And that's because the 49ers did a really nice job of keeping everything in front of them. I thought what Steve Wilks did, making sure that, hey, like if we're not going to rush reckless, we are going to make sure our defensive line stays in their rushing lanes, and Jalen Hurts is not going to have those long carries. He finished the game with 20 yards rushing. Like that is such a big deal. The Eagles in general, 18 carries for 46 yards, averaging 2.6 yards per carry. Able to stop them on early downs after the first couple of drives, really helped them get off the field. Honestly, Ambry Thomas deserves a ton of credit, man. He's been making plays every week. He made a couple plays today. I think that they just have the athletes finally outside with him and Mooney Ward. And then you pair that with the defensive line. Like they're clicking on all cylinders. I think even if they were to rematch the Eagles, I'm not going to say it would look like today, but I think the 49ers would beat the Eagles if they played again in the NFC Championship.
Yeah, I mean, currently, I definitely feel that same way, and I do want to give credit to Mooney Ward too because he was targeted quite a bit, especially on the Eagles' first couple of drives. But he had two plays in which the Eagles or Jalen Hurts targeted AJ Brown in the end zone, and one was a straight up pass breakup, and the other one like just great coverage, hit him on the back of his jersey. So I mean, I gotta give credit. Like that's a hard one-on-one matchup. The Eagles love AJ Brown one-on-one, as you saw early in the game. Like that's why they kept throwing it to him. Um, but I mean, I think he was resilient in this one, as were all the corners. But you mentioned something that I want to touch on really quick before we head out of here. It seemed like the 49ers had a great game plan in place to stop the Eagles' ground game. Like, not even just DeAndre Swift, but Jalen Hurts as well. We saw them activate Kalia Davis for the first time this season. He got some looks in there. We saw a lot of Greenlaw in the game. We didn't see a lot of Chase Young, which was kind
I
of
noticed
weird,
that
right?
too.
But I think that was part of their game plan to just keep everything like contained in the pocket. I don't know. Like, what'd you think about that? Like, did you feel like Chase Young not having that many snaps had to do with just the game plan of stopping the Eagles' run?
Well, if you talk to Commanders fans, one of their biggest gripes about Young was that he would selfishly rush inside, like he'd start outside and then like give
Mhm.
up his pass rushing lane. So maybe that is why, and that could just be who he is at this point. And Steve Wilkes wasn't going to chance it, wasn't going to risk it, and then left guys like Randy Gregory, guys like Cleveland Farrell on the field instead. So I think if anything, that's just good coaching. You know what
Right. I was
Chase
gonna
Young
say
is
that's
like when Young was on the field, I noticed that he was inside a bit more. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because I did notice that too. But I mean, when you have a guy in Mooney Ward who can shadow AJ Brown, who's legit one of the five best. I don't know why people don't mention AJ Brown as one of the five best receivers in the NFL when they talk about that. Like he's
yeah, for
strong
real.
and fast and big. Like that's what you need to be a dominant receiver. But Mooney like was competitive on all these passes. On the early one on the first down, the big slant. If Jair Brown makes a tackle,
Yeah.
it's like 2nd and 4, and the Eagles have to drive the length of the field. Instead, they're in the red zone now because of the missed tackle. But Mooney leads the league in pass breakups. I feel like he doesn't get acknowledged for a lot of the plays that he makes. Like he's challenged a ton, but makes a lot of plays, and he is so good. He's very good at what he does, and like he's playing up to, if not above, his contract.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's such a tough matchup for like any corner. I knew that AJ Brown was gonna get his in this
That's what he
game, but
does.
that's what he does. I just felt like Mooney Ward did enough, obviously, to limit him. And you saw Jalen Hurts in the pocket for so long. Credit to that offensive line. His offensive line is absolutely unfair. But the fact that he was just back there for so long tells you there wasn't anyone open. And that's credit to all of the corners. And that's why he took a few sacks in this game, too. And most of the sacks that he's had this season were kind of those sacks of him just holding on to the ball too long because some of his guys aren't open. But the 49ers secondary, I thought, did a great job in this game. As you know, we already mentioned the run defense and how great that was. It kind of made them one dimensional pretty early. Even like there was one attempt of the QB draw, and Nick Bosa like sniffed that out so quick. I've never seen Nick Bosa run so fast than I did in this game. Like so many times. He's not beating the allegations, but I mean, it was just an impressive like game from all of those guys, and man, I just got to give it to him. It was a great performance all around on both sides of the football. Special teams, there wasn't anything, too bad to say about that either. It was interesting because Ray-Ray McCloud was out in this game, and so we got a little mix of Deebo returning kicks and then Ronnie Bell returning punts.
I thought he was going to house that one, by the way. So
He would
he
have.
was he was
I think he
close.
would have.
Just got
I
tripped
think
up, little shoestring tackle.
yeah. When Deebo starts to run like that, like when he hits that he hit that second gear and he
It's
just got
insane.
tripped up. But once he hits that second gear, I just know he has like a bunch of room in front of him. So I had a feeling I'll see it on all 22, but I had a feeling he would have probably broken that. But
Well, he's legit one of like the fastest players in the NFL when the ball's in his hands. Like Next Gen Stats doesn't have a
yeah.
lot of people over 20 miles an hour this year, and he's one of them. So like when he gets going after a couple steps, he really hits top gear.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't wait to see this team play once again. Another game against the Seahawks. That's going to be a fun one. But KP, thank you so much for joining me to break down this game. Awesome game to break down, and I'm glad your prediction held true on this one, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, the spots, right? The spots screamed like it was going to be the 49ers. You know, they had this circled. You know, this meant a lot to them. But I think you got to give credit to the coaches, right, for executing a really freaking good game plan, taking advantage of where Philly is not good at. And I mean, I think Shanahan, he deserves even more just because I'm going to lean on my playmakers, and then knowing that the Eagles had just been on the field for 5 quarters, that they've been on the field over the last month, a ton of snaps. That's when I'm going to run it late in the game with Christian McCaffrey. And it worked like to a plan. It couldn't have worked out better for them on both sides of the ball. So they're going to be tough to beat. Before we get out of here, do they run the table?
What?
Do the 49ers run the table? Do they finish the season with 3 losses?
The 49ers finish the season with 3 losses?
Like, do they win the rest of the
with just 3 losses? Yeah, they went out.
Yeah,
I think so. I think their toughest game, going forward is that game against the Ravens, right?
Lamar, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big test. Similar, to this Eagles offense and that attack. But I think right now the Ravens defense is better than Philadelphia's defense. So that's going to be a big test. And I think the 49ers can win it. I mean, if they play like they have been these last few weeks, I think so. They're going to have to if they want to get that 1 seed, right?
Right. So that matters a ton, and you can't avoid to slip up. So let's say the Eagles lose next week to the Cowboys, and now they have 3 losses. The 49ers have 3 losses. Who knows what happens with the Lions, but let's assume that the Lions stay with 3 losses. The 49ers, if they slip up against Baltimore at home, like maybe there goes the 1 seed. So they're going to have some motivation to play. I do think the 49ers and the Ravens are the 2 best teams in the NFL. So maybe having a little home field advantage will help. But that's going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, I hope they win that one because I don't want them to ruin my Christmas. They already made my Thanksgiving a good, so hopefully Christmas is the same. But again, KP, I appreciate you. Make sure you guys check out all of KP's content on Niners Nation. Always putting out great stuff. And I know someone in the comments pointed out you also put some good film breakdowns on your YouTube, right? You want to give a little promo here real quick?
Yeah, Kyle Posey on YouTube. After the games, I'm gonna try to cut up, whatever I see. Today, I don't know. I mean, usually I go for, the opening drive. They didn't score on the opening drive, but there are plenty of touchdowns to pick from, and then defense too. Like, I keep bringing back to defense because you cannot talk about this team without talking about what they're doing on that side of the ball. So maybe I'll start with the defensive side of the ball and what Steve Wilkes did to slow down a team that's one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. Really great performance by them, by the whole team. Appreciate you, KP. Appreciate all of you guys who tuned in. Enjoy this win. It was a big one. We were waiting for this all season. So make sure you guys all have a great Sunday night. Don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. But for now, have a good rest of your Sunday night, folks. Peace.